All right, so let's kind of just dive in here and let's talk about some various considerations. So we have this tool called the My Neon Flex Designer that will help us in our design process. This is available on the website, myneonflex.com. It's $39 for the macro. Will work with any version of CorelDRAW. Um, and it does come with 50 pre-configured designs ready to go, um, so you can go straight to production with them. Okay, um, but let's talk about how we're going to go about creating this design. So one of the first things that we have to think about is how many pieces of LED uh, neon are we going to be using to create this design. So for example, let's just take the letter T for example. Okay, so we have the top part, and let's just bring this down. We have the bottom part. So it's going to be two pieces. Our letter Y is going to be two pieces. The M, in reality, right, is going to be three pieces. Now, our letter E, sometimes I will make that. Uh, it could be one piece. It could be two pieces. In this particular example, let's make it this. This is how I generally will do it. Okay, so let me just trim that back here, just so we can see this a little bit more clearly. Sometimes I'll do that. Sometimes I won't. That's a pretty sharp corner, and I don't know. I keep going back and forth. That's a pretty sharp corner. In this case, I'm not going to make it two pieces. I'm just going to make it one. But that is a sharp corner. That does concern me. This is even a sharper corner. Okay? And so in this case, I probably will make that in three separate pieces. Okay? That's how I drew it. I drew it in three separate pieces. So that's probably how I will go about making it. All right? Now let's see here. Let's take a look at our three. So you see how I made the three? It's one piece and then two pieces. Our F, I have set it up in three pieces. Um, and that's probably how I'm going to make it. Could I make that 90-degree corner? I could. Um, but in this case, I don't think I'm going to. So when we get into actually putting the LED on the board, that's something you might want to experiment with when for your own sake. Is am I comfortable making that 90-degree turn, or do I not like that? That's entirely up to you. Um, I kind of go back and forth sometimes, but I'll explain why that is when we actually get into making the sign. So then maybe you could take some considerations. All right. So the B here, we've got that piece, and then this piece, and then this piece. So that's how I would make that. Our Y, I would make it like this. So I would come down here and make this piece and then that piece connect like that. That's not how I drew it though. I drew it in three pieces because I was not thinking. So, but that's why I want to walk you through all this, because this is all stuff that's very easily fixed, and I'll show you my process and my thought process as I go along. So what are we doing here? Well, let's see how I drew it. So that's one piece, and then that's one piece. And that is how I put this together. This is too sharp of an angle. I feel like this is too sharp of an angle. So this is exactly how I would do it. I would do it in three pieces. Okay, so with that said, let's start looking at each one of these pieces and see if we have issues. So for example, so we always go to the Design Edit tab because that's what we're fixing to do. And let's just start with the T. So if we look at the T, I'm going to come over to settings real quick. We aren't going to add a wire margin. Okay, almost never would you add a wire margin, but it's there if we want to. Okay, so that's one consideration. So what we're saying here is if I click on the letter T, it's saying that the current length is 1.84, but to land exactly on 2 segments, it needs to be 1.96. Okay, so it needs to change a little bit. So all we have to do is just kind of, we'll stretch this out a little bit. First of all, I'm just going to delete that end there. It just looked funny. So we would just stretch this out. See, it says 1.92. Keep stretching it. Now it's 1.95, and that's really close enough. We don't have to have it exactly 1.96, but you know what? Why not? So now that segment is exactly 1.96. So if we cut our LED properly, it will definitely fit in this channel perfectly. So then down here, you could see its current length is 1.97, but we need 1.96. So guess what? That's fine. Now you see how it's a little bit odd down here? I don't know why it's a little bit odd down there. So we're just going to delete that end, and then we'll kind of come back out. Now it's 1.96, 1.96, okay? Now, so when I'm creating this T, I tell you what, I'm not going to get into that just yet. But just know that this is the proper channel. This is the proper channel. We can move on. So let's take a look at the Y here. You can see that the Y is 2.76, but we need it to be 2.94. But really, as far as modifying it, we don't want to modify the top because it's lining up with all the other lettering. So where can we modify it? Well, we can modify it from the bottom, right? So we would just pull this out and see now it's 2.96. So now we're at 2.94. So you see how easy that is? It's, you know, really relatively easy. This piece here, we are at 1.76 and we need to be 1.96. Now we have an issue. And the issue is its current length and what is required is pretty far off. We're talking about 0.2 of an inch, which is basically a quarter inch. A quarter is 0.25, and we are 0.20. So that's the problem. But really the only thing we can do is we could sneak it up a little bit. So, you know, that is a possibility. So we could add some length to it. Yes, it's taller than this, but it does add us, you know, we're at 1.83. So it does add us just a little bit. But really the only other thing we could do is bring this out. That's really the only other way. And now you can see we're really close to where we need to be. So now we're exactly where we need to be. I don't really like doing it that way, but that's what I was talking about, some of the give and take. That may be just how we have to do it for this one. Now, ultimately, I may decide to switch this over to 2-part LED neon and forget about the price tag associated with doing that. um, but if that's the only sacrifice we have to make, I'll make that sacrifice. Okay, so and I'll just keep it a 1-part LED. So let's move on. So you can see here, this is 1.72. We need it to be 1.96. So what are we going to do? Well, we can cheat this a little bit at the top and bottom. But how much do we have to cheat it? So that's 1.93. That's a little bit too much. So that is 1.96. Okay. So we dipped below that a little bit, but to me, that's not a huge deal. We are a little bit taller. Again, not a huge deal. Those are just some of the things that we have to consider. Okay. So now this next one is 2.6, and we need to be 2.94. So that's okay, because even though the difference there is almost a half an inch, that's a pretty significant difference, but we probably have that much room where we can modify that. So first of all, this has a lot of unnecessary nodes, so I want to go ahead and get rid of that. So now we don't have unnecessary nodes. This we're going to delete because we're going to modify this and then copy it over. So first thing we can do is we can make it a little bit longer to line up. So now you can see we're at 2.78 and we need to be at 2.94. And then we can just pull this up. 2.87, 89, 91, 2, 3, 94. And then we step back and take a look. There's our other segment. And yes, I can live with that. I can make that work. I'm okay with that. Okay? Now, if I can explain this, I'm going to do my best to explain this, but hopefully it will make some sense to you. So, where this M is connecting here and connecting here, it's not a square connection. It's at an angle, right? So you can see that angle. Same thing here. With the Y, with this piece connecting to this piece, it's not a square. It's at an angle. But on the T, it is a square. On the F, it is a square. Certain parts of the B, this connection here, here, and here, they're all square. This one is not. This one's at an angle. Okay, so anytime there's a connection at an angle, there is going to be that small separation here. Okay, now on the Y, I'm cheating this a little bit because this is the right size, but you can see it's connecting here, and it really shouldn't be. But we're going to make this work. That'll be fine for the Y. All right, now we can already see a bit of a situation here because you can clearly see that the E looks considerably smaller than the M. If you look at the Y and the M, those two look pretty comparable in size. So that's one thing that we're going to have to change right off rip. We're going to have to make this look like it belongs. So let's do that. Now that could be just a touch too big. Let's see. Let me kick back and take a look. Okay, I think I like that. If we put a kind of an imaginary line there and there. Okay. All right. I could live with that. But now here's the next question. So I drew this as two pieces. I'm going to change that to be one. So you can see here, if we go to wireframe mode, we can see this a little bit better. You can see that the two paths start and end at the same point. So that's a good thing. So we'll select them both, and we'll hit combine, and then we'll double click on that new combined line, and there's two nodes, one on top of another, so then we want to join the nodes. And you can see there, that changed a little bit, and actually, I see that I drew a third path. I have no idea why I would have done that. So back over here, connect those two nodes that are right on top of one another. And so now this is in fact one piece. So the LED is going to come over, up, and around and through. Now, the reason that originally I didn't want to have this sharp line, and ultimately I may not, is you cannot bend the LED strip without notching it. You cannot bend it around a corner that sharp without notching it. And so we're going to definitely have to notch it to make it work. And like I said, you may want to do that. You may not want to do that. You may find it easier just to do it in two separate pieces. But for what I'm going to do, I'm going to say I'm going to do it in one. So now we have this one singular path that is 6.52, but it needs to be 6.86. So the difference is almost 3/8 of an inch. Okay, and so that's kind of significant. So again, this is 6.52. We need 6.86. So that's a pretty big difference. So how are we going to gain 3/8 of an inch to this? Well, there is another option, in that it would be to take away So if we took that away and that away, see now it's saying that we need only 6 segments. So that's one thing we could have done instead of 7. So that's one thing you could do. And you could see here it says we are at 0.63 and we need to be at 5.88. So you see this button that says trim to size and trim to ends. That's actually a really useful function. Let me double click on this and explain this. So you see how this arrow is pointing in this direction and this arrow is pointing in this direction. Well, what that means is that this is our starting point and this is our ending point. So you see in a situation like this where our current length is longer than our required length, we can just click on this button and watch what happens real closely. Watch what happens right there. Trim to size. Boom. Whoa! It took away it trimmed it up to the point of where we needed it to trim it up. But now we got this big old gaping hole there. So we don't like that. But the other thing that you could do is if you hold the control key down and click trim to size, what it's going to do is it's going to trim just a touch off of each side. Watch this. And when I say a touch, in this case, it's whacking off almost 1/4 of an inch on both sides, which is pretty significant whack. Okay? So but what we're left with is a shape that's exactly the size that we require. Okay? So we may decide we want it that way. If you come back and take a look at it, it's not horrible. But no, I don't really like that. But I just wanted to show you all the different considerations that we can go into. So again, going back, what is our next consideration? Because we need to add, quite a bit here. Well, what we're going to do here, first of all, this has way too many nodes. So let's get rid of those extra nodes. We don't need all that extra. And so you can see there, it looks way better now. It looks like there's a doubled up node there that's unnecessary also. Okay? So that's better than it was. So, but now we still are at the same length and we need to extend this a little bit. So how are we going to go about doing that? Well, one thing we could do is we could just push this out a little bit. And you can see there, now we're at 6.56. So we gained there. Let's see here. We'll just add a node here and we could pull this out a little bit. Right? I didn't see that one there. Let's undo that. I was looking for it, but I didn't see it. There we go. So we can pull that out a little bit and just keep an eye on this number. Now we're at 6.96. What if we pulled this down a little bit? That would gain us a little bit, 6.69. This can come over. Almost touching. Not quite, 6.86. So if we're happy with this, what we could do is we just need it just a touch more. So maybe what I'm going to do here, because we just need a little bit more, just bump that out just a tiny little bit. 6.83, bump that out. 6.87, that was too much. 6.86, okay? And I'm not hating on that. I think that will ultimately be fine. It'll blend. That'll be fine. So you see there, we want a little bit more space between the E and the M. Because see here, our spacing might be off a little bit. But all in all, I'll be happy with that. So now we talked about our Z. Now we talked about the Z that it would not be done in one piece. Okay, we definitely are going to do this in 3 pieces. So I drew it. Yeah, I did draw it in 3. So this top piece here is currently 1.6, but we really need it to be 1.96. So let's start there, making this 1.96 and just see how big that actually is. Zoom in here a little bit. 1.96. So that's exactly 2 segments. So I don't think we're going to be in hurting there at all. I think that could work. So now, but this piece needs to be the same. It needs to be 2.96 as well, or 1.96 rather. And you can see here, this is 1.96, but you can see that we've got a bit of an issue because uh, it's too short for the space that we need to fill. And we cannot make it a whole inch longer either. So that's going to be an issue for sure. Um, so that's just something that we are going to have to figure out. Now, the only thing that I can really see us doing that we could possibly get away with a little bit is bumping that up a little bit like so. Uh, Bringing this down just a touch. And maybe just increasing our angle a little bit. And while it's not a perfect solution, it would still give us the look of a Z. You can clearly see it's a Z, but you see how we're coming in a little bit here and we're coming in a little bit here. We brought that down to cover that gap up a little bit. So it's not a perfect solution, but it may be, yeah, I'll have to sit back and think about it, but that may just have to be one of those sacrifices that we have to make, that like we talked about. Okay? So this is the real deal here, folks. This is what you're going to have to, the considerations that we're just going to have to make as we go through this. All right, so let's do our next easy letters. I think our Y will be easy. Again, these are two separate parts that we're going to make one. So we're going to combine. We're going to double click on that. We are going to, where those two combine, there's node on top of node, so we're going to join that. And so we are at 2.6 and we need to be at 2.94. So to make exactly 3 segments. So that's a bummer. So we need to make this bigger. We're at 2.77 and we need to make that bigger. We're at 2.92. Now it says we need to be at 2.94, but I think that's close enough where we can make that work. So I'm not even going to fiddle with that no more and make it any longer. We'll make that work. Now this is definitely an issue. So this is at 1.6 and this is at 1.96. So that is a significant size difference. So basically, this is going to give us an opportunity to show you something that we have to go against the grain a little bit, and this is not typical of how we would create this. Okay, so this is going to just require a special circumstance, and this is one of the reasons why if you go with the two-part LED, we don't have to really concern ourselves so much about all these dimensions and making sure that everything lands exactly where it needs to land. But this will give us an opportunity to go ahead and show you how to handle the situation when you just can't avoid it. Okay? So what we're going to do here, we do have that gap because remember the connector is at an angle, so we are going to have a gap here. But you can see that we're quite a bit different. So we do want to be at 2 segments, but you see here it says it's showing what we would have to do if we wanted to trim this down to a single segment, which in this case we don't want to do that. Okay, so don't worry about it. We're going to show you how we're going to fix that. Let's go ahead and pull that up there. I think that'll look a little bit better. We'll show you how to fix it. But it is just a special circumstance at the end of the day. Okay, so let's move on. B here, we're at 2.32. We need to be at 1.96. again, a significant difference in size. Um, we can make it a little bit bigger, but I mean, you're talking about a lot bigger. We're at 2.6. We need to be at 2.94. This design is just gonna kill me because this is one of those special circumstances again. We need to be at 2.94, and it's not near long enough. It's only at 2.6. So like once again, it's saying that we need three segments. Um, but we don't have room for three segments, so we're going to have to make room at the end of the day. And like I said, I'll explain how we go about doing that. But it's a little bit frustrating that we have to do that. But let's see if we can make the rest of it work. I don't know. So you see here, first of all, we have lots of nodes. So we are going to get rid of all those extras, so we don't have that to contend with. And let's go ahead and put this where we want it to be. So it's going to connect like that. And you can see here, it says we're at 3.26. We need to be at 2.94. So that's relatively simple because we can just bring this in a little bit. And you can see, so if we bring that in to 2.95, 94. So you can see it didn't really change our B all that much. So now this one is a little bit different because of how it's going to have to connect. So it's and then the other thing is I didn't really think about is that really should be down here. So you can see here that's quite a bit different. So maybe we'll just leave that one. And if we got to make an adjustment, we'll make it down here. So, which clearly we're going to have to make an adjustment because this is going to have to go all the way up here, and then this is going to kind of have to connect somewhere around there. Okay. Now I'm not super happy with that yet, but we're going to get there. So let's adjust this a little bit. Bring this down a little bit. Maybe even bring it out. What do we got here? Okay. So this is 2.96 and it needs to be so it's 2.6, it needs to be 2.94, and this one is 2.94. So it's needing to be bigger to hold our three segments, and it needs to be quite a bit bigger, but we're not going to concern ourselves with that. We'll fix that later. So this will give us an opportunity to fix all of these things. So this one here, we're going to make that work. This one here is too small, but we're going to make it work. This is too small, but we're going to make it work. This one's dead on. This one's too small, and this one is too small. So this one here, you can see we're at 1.39. It would have to grow to 1.98 to fit. So, that's a far off. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to have to fix it as we go. Now this one here, because it's not that far off, we're going to go ahead and trim it to size. You can see we're at 0.98, so that will ultimately work just fine. Okay, our number 3 here is going to have to grow a little bit, first of all, to fit with his brethren. So we're going to have to make that a little bit taller. Step 1. And then let's see how far off we are. So we're at 3.09. We need to be at 2.94. So we're not off by a ton, but we are off. So now we're dead on. So we are going to go ahead and reduce our nodes to 10 here. And then down here, we're going to see where it says trim end. We're just going to click that a few times so we have our little space that we need. And then take a look at it. So we need to be at we're at 2.87. We need to be at 2.94. So we're not off by much. So we will fix that, definitely. So we will just come in here and reduce our notes, first of all. So one quick way to fix this, let's see here. Let's do this. I don't know. I'm going to smooth this out just a little bit. So one way to fix this, you can see we're basically less than 1/8 of an inch difference, is by stretching that out, pulling this up. See, we're at 2.9 right now, just in that little change. And now we're at 3.01. So if I click on Shift, Trim to Size, it'll nip it down there, and now you can see that one is exactly the size it needs to be now. Okay? So there we go. That ultimately, for all of our red lettering, we are going to have to edit a few pieces because we could not modify it to fit the way we truly need it to fit. And yes, our T is just a little bit smaller than those first few letters, but I'm not that concerned about that to really worry about it. So, at the end of the day, I think this is going to work. I don't think the customer is really going to complain about those little changes that we made. All right, so now we got to fix our A here. First of all, let's start with this piece. This piece, you can clearly see we need it to be 1.96, but it's 1.61. So let me show you a nice little trick. All right. So what we want to do here, let's pull up our calendar. No, we need our calculator. So we need to go back to 5th grade math and talk about percentages. So we have a shape that we need it to be a certain size. So what we're going to do is we're going to enter in the size we need, which is 1.96. That's the size we want it to be. And you can see that it's currently 1.61. So we want to divide that by 1.61. Okay? And that's going to give us this number. Okay? So this is 1.28. Because remember, if it's greater than 5, then we round up. So so you can see here, this is 7. So I said 0.28. I meant 0.22 because we're going to add 1 because this is 7. Okay? If that makes any sense. So in that first number, when we make this calculation, that first number to the left of the decimal, that is 100. Okay? If there was two numbers there, then it would be 1,000. Okay? So what we need to do is we need to scale our at symbol to 122%, and then that line will become 1.96. Fancy, huh? So scale this 122%. And I think we can scale it that much and still kind of be within the realm of our red lettering. See? So it's a little bit bigger, but not like crazy big. So now that piece, though, is now you can see the size that we need. Pretty fancy, huh? And the reason why it wasn't exactly 1.96 is because we had all that rounding, but we just went to the second digit. So that's cool. So then the next piece will be this piece, but what we're going to do here is we're going to trim this end because we're at an angle here. So watch this. I click trim end, and you see right here it's getting smaller, 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 smaller every time I click on it. 1 millimeter. We're chipping away 1 millimeter at a time. So now we have that space we want, and then we hit shift trim end. It's going to trim off the bottom. Okay, so that's how that works. It's going to take a millimeter off the bottom, off the bottom, off the bottom, off the bottom, off the bottom. There we go. Okay, so visually that's what it's going to look like, but how far off are we? Well, we are 3.4 and we need to be 2.94. So basically we're off almost a half an inch. So that's pretty significant. So what do we do? Well, we could do like we did over here with our Y and do some fancy, messing around with our LED strip that I'm going to show you how we're going to have to do it over here. I don't want to do it over here. So one potential solution is make it bigger. Make it so it will fit 4 segments. So I don't think we'll have to change it a whole lot. Look at there. So now we're at 4 segments, and now we're at 355, but we need to be 392. Well, you can just keep pulling it, and you can see it does keep adding to it, but I don't know. I don't know if we're going to get it that big. Okay, so we did, well, yeah, I mean, maybe we could. So we are at the right size now. So that part's good. But do we like it for our @ symbol? Let me reduce these nodes quick. First of all, take a step back. I don't hate it yet, so I think we're kind of be okay. I'm going to click on trim ends here. We need to pull this @ symbol back to have a little bit of space because, again, the connector is at an angle. So, okay, I'm happy with that. Let's go ahead and smooth this out with our reduced nodes. Don't need that many nodes. Okay, so I'm good there. Now, we need 10.78, and we are 11.13. Well, that's really easy. Trim to size. So if I double click on this, you can see here this arrow is pointing this direction, and this one is pointing that direction. So this is the start, and that's the end. That's what it means. So we're going to hit trim to size, but we're going to hold our shift key to trim off the bottom. Boop. And now you can see that trimmed it perfectly to the size we needed. We have 11 segments there. And if you come back and look at it, as far as the @ symbol goes, I am happy with the way that looks. What if we just did this? We do have one other option. So we just made a copy of it. If we scale this back down to, see, it's at 3.15. Let's go ahead and click Control Trim to Size. So we need to be at 2.94. So what it's going to do is going to trim off both sides when I click Trim to Size and the Control key. So then we could just take a step back and decide, okay, this is 3 segments, this is 4 segments. Which do we like better for our @ symbol? This we cannot change, okay, because it is already the right size. This is the right size, so this is the only thing that we would modify. And I have to confess, I do actually prefer this one. It is not exactly perfect, but we'll make it exactly perfect. Doesn't take nothing to do it. There we go. I do actually like that better than this one. So let's just go ahead and delete that. And I will definitely sit and nitpick every single sign like this because that's just who I am. All right, let's go ahead and save this. File save. And that, my friends, is our finished LED sign. That's it. That is it. So that's the basic layout. Almost everything will land perfectly on the spot that we need it to land on. Perfectly. But this piece will not, or no, this piece ultimately did, but this piece did not, this piece did not, this piece did not, this piece did not, and this piece did not. Okay, everything else that did, that did, that did, that did, that did, that did. Everything else across the board did. There's just those couple pieces up front here. And because they're just single straight pieces, like this one is okay. And this one is okay now. No, this one we'll have to modify. But because they're only straight pieces, I'm not that concerned about it. But we'll talk about that when we get into production. All right. So now that we have all of that done, all we need to do is recreate our backer board down here. So I will copy this over. I like to always make copies. Copy this over, and we're going to do a 1-inch backer. So Shift Add Backer Board. Sometimes we get great results, and sometimes we don't. In this case, we got good results. So all I have to do is come in here, draw a little rectangle. We are going to modify this just a little bit, weld those two together. I like to have nice straight lines. So, yeah, that's just what I like. So, first of all, let's pull that down. This isn't quite where we need it to be. It needs to be right there. And then, by doing that little adjustment there, we can just come across here and boop, delete all that stuff. And right-click on that and hit 2-line. Boom, got a nice straight line. See how that works? Then we'll do the same thing over here. We'll come over here, we'll draw a little line here, a little rectangle. We'll switch and connect those two. Anything that's sticking out above, goodbye. Don't need it. Same thing at the bottom here. So we will come in here and we'll make a rectangle all the way across. Now where the Y dips down, yeah, that part's fine. But anything that sticks over beyond that, we're whacking it. Zoom in here a little bit. Whacking it. Okay, and then here, I will probably go ahead and do that too. Just go ahead and square that up. I think that looks pretty good. And there we go, my friends. That is our finished board. Okay, now, one last thing we want to talk about real quick. A couple things, actually, just to finish this up. So we talked about anywhere there's a flat connector that's not at an angle, this is what we need to do. So what we need to do is, let's select this on ungroup. So anywhere there's a flat connector, so here there's a flat connector, obviously. We're just going to pull that over like so. Okay. Now down here, there's a flat connector. If we hold our shift key down, that will constrain to a perfect horizontal. So same thing here. We're going to come over here, pull this all the way over here, do the same thing here. I probably should have done this before I added the backer board, but it's okay to do it now. Okay, so it's okay. So we'll pull this up. So those are connecting. This is the one exception. The one exception. This is because we are at an angle here, and we're gonna make those connect, even though they're at an angle and they shouldn't connect. And then E here. What are we going to do with this? E. This is a little bit special case. So let's just, we're going to trim that, put a hole in it, break that apart. Like I said, this is a little bit special case. I won't get into the weeds with it, but it is a little bit special case. And then reconnect it like that. And then this piece we don't need. Okay. All right. So, because that is a more or less flat connector. It's not perfectly flat, but it's pretty close. All right. So that is more or less how it's going to be. But if we go into wireframe mode, you can see that we need to take our B and it needs to be welded together. Our F needs to be welded together. Our T, Y, all that needs to be welded together. So we're just going to select all this stuff. Boom. And weld it all together. Okay. So essentially now that's all one piece. But we'll just go ahead and come in here, weld all of this together. It's not going to hurt anything. It's all one color. And then our yellow bits are all one color. So what's gonna happen here, let's go back in here, is it's when we go to route this, it's gonna route all of the yellow, and then it's gonna route all of the red. Okay. Um, so it's gonna start at one end or the other and just kind of work its way through and all the way across. Okay. So that's gonna work out well. Now let's see here. So we are at 25 inches overall, roughly, give or take. So that'll work fine. So that's it. So now we can hit file and save. Oh, you know what we didn't do, folks? You know what we did not do? Now what do we got to do? I didn't think about this. We might possibly have to back up just a moment here. But maybe not. No. No, 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 no. Let me just double check something here. Okay. Perfect. We're good. I was concerned, but I forgot that this is the one part, not two part. So in the two part LED neon, the channel and the boards are 7 millimeters, but in the one part LED neon, it's 6 millimeters. And so I didn't think I had the right millimeter setting, but yes, we do have the right millimeter setting. So this will create a channel that's exactly 6 millimeters wide. So there we go. So that basically is all I needed to do. So with that all said, now we can go in and take a look on the production side of things, actually making this sign. So I hope you've enjoyed this one, stuck through it all, and I know it's probably a little bit confusing, but once you really figure it out and know exactly what to do, you'll be able to blaze through it much, much quicker. It gets faster and faster as you go. Thanks for watching.